Hi everyone, my name's John and today we're doing beer and Bokeh. The concept's very simple. We are gonna walk around town. We've got film cameras, we've got digital cameras, and we're just gonna see what we see. It's a very nice clear day. You know, the sun's just going down, so we're about to get into nighttime. We're gonna walk up along the river a little, come up to Covent Garden, see all the Christmas lights and everything like that. On the way, we'll talk about kind of what we're shooting and why we're shooting it, and that's pretty much it. So we are, you know, as you can probably see, we're at a pretty iconic view / area of London right now. You know, you've got the Eye there, you've got the, whichever bridge that is, I forget which bridges they are. And I know, obviously, you know, you might be, it's easy to think, you know, everyone's done this shot, everyone's shot this, but I don't know, I think there are a lot of different ways you can kind of make it your own. I mean, like, in all honesty, a big one is just timing. Like, I think we are here on a pretty beautiful evening, and it's not like you can only take photographs in certain conditions, but there is, I think, something to be said to, like, if the light's nice, pick up and go. Beyond that, I think it is just about, like, honing in on what you want, and that can be a number of different things, you know, because there's like zones to this image, aren't there? You know, like, you know, you've got these buildings over here in this clump, you've got the kind of supports of the bridge, the way they cut through the buildings in the distance, and you've got obviously the wheel, and like, you don't have to get all of it. I think, you know, the main lesson I learned anyway was trying to get out of the mindset of just being like, pop, and which is how everyone takes a photo, right? It's how everyone takes a photo on your phone. It's just like, you just stand there and that, and you do that. And I think just trying to hone in on something. And I think, I guess, using sort of more transient elements of the landscape to your advantage. So we have a boat just there that's coming past with its lights on. You know, we've always got birds are always flying over. Planes are often a good one, especially at this time. It's quite hard to see from here, but they leave a really nice trail that can often add a little visual interest. And, you know, and again, it doesn't have to be everything. It can just be any one thing. I think it's just about honing in, you know, just about finding the thing you want to take a picture of. All right, so you might have already noticed, but the light is dropping a little bit. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna retire this camera. It's a Minolta Dynax 500 SI from 1992. It's loaded with some 800T film, which is very light sensitive. It's normally what you want in dark conditions, but we've only got an f4 lens here, f4 at the wide end. So it's probably gonna start to struggle. So we're gonna swap to the Fuji X-T4, which is a digital camera. Wex very kindly lent me this. The only reason I'm pointing that out is because it has an anti-theft sticker on it. So I didn't steal it. But yeah, we've got an f1.4 lens on this, which, yeah, it's a 35, so it's going to be a 50mm equivalent. So it's going to give us a nice kind of do everything focal length. You know, 50mm is very natural. It's kind of what the human eye sees. It's roughly equivalent to that. So shots taken with a 50mm, you know, tend to feel like something you've kind of seen. And we've got, you know, we've got a nice high ISO range. It goes up to 12,800. We probably won't push it beyond 3,200 because beyond that it starts to get a bit too noisy, but anything up to that is fine. Yeah, we've got lots of fun things with this camera. So, in the title of this video, Beers and Bokeh, we got the word Bokeh. Now, the word Bokeh is interesting because if you say it, people will argue with you for two reasons. The first is how it's pronounced. Some people say Bokeh, some people say Bokeh, some people say Bokeh. Everyone picks their own, it doesn't seem to matter. And the second is what it actually means, because it can mean a number of different things. It's like the original technical definition is the shape of the points of light in the defocused areas of an image. You see, we've got all these lovely lights here. If we were to sort of focus on something about here with a very shallow depth of field, the lights in the background would be rendered out of focus. And the original term bokeh refers to what shape those points of light are. Ideally, you want them like nice and round, which is, you know, you get that through lenses with a certain aperture shape if they have like a 9-bladed aperture or whatever. But the term has become a bit more general, and it kind of these days just refers to the defocused area of a shallow depth of field image. You know, if the defocused area looks nice in an image, people will say that's got good bokeh. Whether or not they're technically right is kind of up to you, but that's what bokeh is. So, we called this video beer and bokeh, so there is one more very important part of that equation, which is the beer. Thank you. I think it's something that, you know, is often overlooked when people talk about photography, especially talking photography for fun, is that you are there to have fun. You know, you don't need to be glued to your camera the entire time. You know, you don't need to have it fixed to your eye like, I've got to get the shot, I've got to get the shot. You know, relax. You know, if you're out with friends, enjoy yourself. Like, I think it is important to remember, and it's so easy to lose sight of the fact that we do, a lot of us, most of us who aren't professionals, just do photography to have fun. So, take a break. So we wanted to talk a little about composition because it's, you know, it's a fun thing to focus on. You know, it's the part of photography that you can really control at every moment. You know, how you point the camera, what you point it at, that kind of thing. So it's the kind of area where really like fundamentals, basics is really all you need to remember. Like rule of thirds, for instance, you might be familiar with, you might not. It's basically, it's if you imagine sort of dividing the image into sort of sections of 3, equal sections, where those lines would go are the kind of places that you want to hit to make it visually interesting, especially when we're doing something like bokeh. Because say we got this beer here, and we can put it kind of on the left-hand thirds line just there, and then, you know, get the light nicely in the background. And like we could also shoot it, you know, straight down the barrel, right in the middle, and it looks fine. And it can often still look pretty good with the lights in the background, but it's not necessarily as interesting. One thing we're doing by kind of framing this way, by, you know, placing our subject in only a portion of the image, is we're creating a lot of negative space. And that is a pretty important part of composition because you sort of, you can kind of create a sort of quite a natural way to sort of draw your viewer's eye towards what you want them looking at. You can kind of almost lead them through the image, if that makes sense. So it means when somebody's looking at your image, they're not sort of hunting around, their eye isn't looking around for the thing that they're supposed to be looking at, they're being directed. It can give your images a sense of intentionality. You know, it's like, people understand that this is what you meant to do. You know, you weren't just pointing and shooting, you crafted an image. You know, you thought about where the subject might be in the frame, what might be behind it, what might be around it, and you planned accordingly. And that's making an image, really. That's being a photographer. All right, so as we talked about, we're using this f1.4 lens, which is really nice at this time of night for 2 reasons. One, it just lets a lot of light in. f1.4 is a really wide aperture, so you can handhold a camera like this. You know, you can still get shots that are sharp because your shutter speeds are fast enough that it's not going to blur. And the second is bokeh, because the f1.4 creates a really shallow depth of field, which means there's a very kind of narrow area of the image that's in focus, which means we can get like a main subject in focus and then the light behind it is beautifully out of focus. We get that lovely kind of blurry effect that we were talking about. So we're gonna take this now and we're gonna give it a little try. So there's a nice little patch of light over there just outside the London Transport Museum. The Christmas lights are coming out, so I feel like we might be able to go over there and get some stuff. You can see the Christmas tree in the foreground there. Again, so that can be our foreground subject. I think it's going to be in focus, and then we've got the lights behind that can make all that lovely bokeh. I think you do sometimes hear from photographers or from other people that you should generally be shooting in manual mode, or be taking control of every settings. I really don't think you need to. I think especially with a thing like a Fuji here, because we've got the aperturing here, which is how we control aperture. And so you can basically kind of make your own aperture priority mode where everything else is kind of automated. And so you get this real tactile experience where you're just adjusting the aperture as you shoot. And you can kind of see how that changes the exposure in real time if you're working in live view, or you can use the viewfinder. And I know it's a really satisfying way of working that also means, again, you can just enjoy yourself and you don't have to worry too much. Like, the dials are here if you want them. Like, if you want to, shoot at a particular shutter speed, you can absolutely go nuts, but you don't have to. So this is a prime lens. So this is a fixed 35mm lens, which gives us an equivalent of 50 like we talked about, and we can't zoom in and out. On the Minolta we had earlier, we had 35 to 80, so we had a bit of latitude. Here we've only got 35. So that means if you want to get closer to a subject, your option is move closer to it. And you might think that sounds like a pain in the butt, and you're right, but it does make you think in a different way. It sort of makes you think creatively, like we talked about, putting yourself in different places. I mean, prime lenses have other advantages too. They're generally better optical quality. They are generally, you can get bigger apertures like the f1.4 we talked about. But I do think, and this isn't like a thought that's original to me, it's something that a lot of professional photographers say, is they make you a better photographer because they make you change the way you think. You aren't just standing here, zooming in, zooming out, you are moving, and when you're moving, you're thinking. So we've got these lovely Christmas lights down here. They're creating these really nice lines, and we've also got some white flowers in the foreground just here. And I think if we bang our aperture to f1.4 and we focus on the flowers, we can get something quite nice. Again, we're using that negative space in quite a nice way. We've got the light lines that are leading us towards the flowers. I think another nice thing to do, and it's a thing I think people forget about, is to vary your physical position, because everybody, the standard photo pose is that. And so you can get so much mileage out of your pictures. You can get so much more variety if you are just willing to look a bit stupid and squat or crouch and kind of really get down, or possibly stand on things. Use the landscape to your advantage a little. If you're just willing to be somewhere else physically, you can really just change things up. It feels like a bit of a game changer, So a thing about an alleyway like this, which may or may not happen in our situation, is that there's not a lot going on here, but sometimes you can just kind of sit and wait and somebody might come up, And you can be very casual, you can be very unobtrusive. You're not here to draw attention to yourself, you're just here for a good time. So you can sort of lean against this pillar and you can kind of think about where you might want a subject to be. You can kind of point your camera around, see what else you can get in the meantime, and just kind of wait, and eventually you might kind of get the sort of figure that you want. So in photography, we do talk a lot about rules. There are a lot of rules about composition, about how to sort of frame an image. We've talked a little about rules in this video, and the rules are there for a good reason. They work, but you can also deliberately break rules in a way that's effective. And I think it's important to point out that's not the same as ignoring them. You shouldn't just not know what the rules are, but intentionally breaking it can lead to interesting results. Like earlier on just now, we were coming down towards Trafalgar Square here, and there was some neon signs, you know, and they said, you know, like words that we all know, like pizza, vino, I don't remember what the other one said, probably pasta. So, you know, you take a shot of that, it's kind of boring, but, you know, what I did was, you know, you flip this onto manual focus and you point it there and you just nudge it a little out of focus. And that is deliberately break your rule. I mean, you know, things should be in focus is probably the fundamental rule of photography, right there with things should be correctly exposed. And so by doing that, we were able to make an image that was just a little more interesting. And like, you know, it's not an amazing image. It's not like a photograph that's going to change the world, but it's just something nice. And it was a little more interesting than just taking a picture of the sign. I think that idea is why a lot of people, is certainly why I still like film so much, because photography, and especially digital photography, is often a search for perfection. You know, it's the sharpest image, it's the most perfectly in focus. And there is something really knockabout fun with shooting film on a camera that was made before you were born, you know, and it's something that's very hard to replicate otherwise. And so I think sometimes, while it's, you know, it can be fun to search for perfection, and, you know, if you are on a commercial shoot, if you are doing this professionally, obviously it needs to be perfect. But if you're just doing it for yourself, then there's something fun about imperfection. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I get a roll of film back and there are some shots on it that are just awful. But I really like them because I took them and I can remember the moment when I took them, and I can, you know, and they're also a learning experience because I can see what I did wrong. I can kind of remember what I did wrong, but they're fun to me and they hold a place in my heart in a way they probably wouldn't if they were technically perfect. So, as you can probably tell, it's pretty dark, it's quite cold. We're probably going to finish up here and we're going to do what every photographer does. We're going to go home, we're going to have a look at what the shots look like. You know, I've got the digital camera here, I've had a look, some stuff looks okay, but you know, everything looks good on the LCD screen. I've got the film camera in there, God knows what happened there. But I think the thing that I really want to stress is that it's ultimately not the point. Like, I had a really good time today, you know, like, I don't generally come to central London to do photography, so this was a lovely thing to do, and that is just so important, to do things because you want them, to shoot them because you want them, and you don't need to do it by yourself. Like, they haven't really appeared on camera, but I've had James and George here with me, and they've made the whole day so much fun. And I do think if there's anything to take away from this, it's just to enjoy taking pictures, because if you're not enjoying it, what's the point? All right, I think that pretty much about does it. Thank you so much everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a few tips and tricks, and we'll catch you next time. I've been John, this has been Wex Photo Video, beer and bokeh.